As soon as I picked up the OnePlus Open, I said, this is a foldable that I actually daily, and that's game changing. So let's talk about that. Alright, who would have guessed at the start of the year that the best foldable would come from OnePlus? There's a lot to cover here, so please stick with me. But up until recently, it was Samsung that was coming out with the heaviest hitters in the foldable field. They'll still likely eat up the market share, but there are many reasons to go for an Open over a Fold. The OnePlus Open is a fold, not a flip, meaning it has a vertical crease in the center and can be used as a normal phone when shut, thanks to the largely standard front display. It's all about the displays with these things, and the Fold has a fantastic pair of panels. Up front is a 6.31-inch 120Hz LTPO OLED, which can reach a whopping 2,800 nits in peak HDR brightness. That's brighter than the Pixel 8 Pro's panel, which in itself is a crazy bright display. It'll also be super fluid and responsive, and at just over Full HD Plus pin sharp too. You can, and I have, just used this phone with the cover screen some days, and its aspect ratio makes it easy to operate like a normal phone screen as opposed to the skinnier ones that you'll find on Samsung's offerings. But you are rewarded by opening up the OnePlus Open with its huge 7.82-inch 2268 by 2440 120Hz LTPO OLED with the same 2800 nits in peak HDR brightness. This is one heck of a display. It has a pretty effective anti-glare coating that makes it easily visible out in sunlight, which is much appreciated because you tend to get a lot of glare on these typical glossy internal displays. This coating isn't perfect and there is some glare, but it makes a noticeable difference. What also makes a big difference is what OnePlus has done with the crease. It's still there and you can still feel it and see it if you're really searching for it, but it's very subtle and honestly barely noticeable. This is one of the cleanest ones I've seen yet. Even when swiping left and right over it with your finger, it's so subtle, it's so well done. And there isn't a gap in the middle when you do close the hinge. And whilst we're here, the hinge feels very robust with zero creaking in my time with it. It makes a satisfying sound whether you're opening it or closing it. And again, this has set the benchmark on how foldables should be in my opinion. That said, you are only getting IPX4 water resistance, so it might survive a light amount of rain, but any heavier downpours, I would put this phone away immediately, and I certainly would be careful leaving it on a table next to a full cup of water. Oh, and I'd recommend using the quite good included case if you want to protect that absolute dinner plate of a camera bump. It's huge and it sticks out a lot. It's easy to catch on your pocket. I don't mind the look of it, but my gosh, you got to deal with it. If you play a lot of games or watch a lot of content, the OnePlus Open is the phone for you. You already know that the foldables offer a huge display anyway, but with this brightness and fluidity, it really is something else. Actually, it's pretty easy to make good use of that space too, with the little dock in the bottom, which you can use to open a second app to use side by side, or in a window that you can drag around the display. And you can even split the screen into 3 apps and take that third app and just move it down to create like this weird mosaic effect. You can have 2 normal sized windows and then 1 double sized window. OnePlus has done a great job of making the large display actually useful. In fact, the OnePlus Open's hardware as a whole is really well done. We have the green glass back model here too, but there's also an eco leather option. You get a speaker on all 4 corners, which translates to a setup that gets loud, stays pretty clean sounding towards the top end with some good detail. The side mounted fingerprint scanner is fast and accurate, and the buttons feel tactile and well situated. Speaking of, OnePlus's staple 3-stage ringer toggle is present and correct, being easy to use whether your phone is open or closed, and is something that Samsung's foldables don't have. In traditional OnePlus fashion, the company has decided to just throw all of the high-end performance specs in here to give you the fastest and most fluid experience. In fact, you have no choice because there's one SKU, 512 gigs of UFS 4 storage and 16 gigs of RAM. Which, as unsurprising as it is, makes the phone feel rapid. Obviously, this is helped by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor. The performance is outstanding, including even playing power-hungry games on that hard-to-drive main display as well. The OnePlus Open makes light work of pretty much everything you throw at it, not to mention some cool features that you get with a chip like this, Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.3, USB 3.1, they all help the phone feel quick and responsive connectivity-wise as well. Foldable phones, in my eyes, are meant to be the top tier of devices, and having the best specs is important for that, so I'm glad that we see that here. And given that these phones are so expensive, the OnePlus Fold is $1,700 after all, it makes sense that they have the best software too. Oxygen OS seems to be quite divisive amongst the community. Some find it a little cheap feeling or undercooked compared to One UI and Pixel experience, but the truth is, I don't mind it. Speaking of which, the OnePlus Open should receive 4 versions of Oxygen OS and 5 years of security patches, which should keep this device going for another half a decade. That's a pretty solid commitment, and about what I'd expect for a phone that costs as much as this. If you're worried about battery life with a foldable like this, with the 2 big bright displays, don't be. The 4,805 mAh battery might not sound ginormous given the size of the thing and the fact we're in 2023, there are phones out there with 5k mAh batteries that don't fold open, but combined with Oxygen OS's efficiency, this phone lasts a long time on a charge. I couldn't kill it in a day. It was a guaranteed all-day phone for me, with the main display open for a solid portion of that usage as well. These weren't the days where I was just using the external screen. It's a 2-day phone for me pretty much every time I use it, although I'm on the lower end of sort of usage in my time. But if you need to top it back up in a jiffy, that's no problem either, because it comes with a 67-watt SuperVOOC charger that gets the phone from 0 to 100 in about 45 minutes, which is pretty rapid and much quicker than a lot of the competition. That said, there's no wireless charging option here, even with this glass back, and I think at this price point, it should be included, so I'm going to dock points for it, and if you are after that particular feature, you will have to go with the Samsung Z Fold. When it comes to the cameras, these are some of the best on a foldable smartphone, perhaps aside from the Google Pixel Fold if you take into account its excellent processing and image tweaking tools. From a hardware perspective though, this might take the crown. The main 48 megapixel 1/1.43 inch sensor captures some fantastic photos through its 24mm 1.7 OIS lens. Whether you're shooting at night, during the day, or anything else, the large sensor manages to capture plenty of light information from black to brilliant white, but also manages to keep the contrast in check so that photos don't come out looking really fake. There's plenty of detail and sharpness throughout the images, though in some instances I saw a bit of an HDR blooming effect that I didn't quite like, and you're not getting that super reliable, responsive point-and-shoot experience that the Pixel Fold offers, but it's not that bad, and most of the time the images do come out looking good. The 48 megapixel ultra-wide is pretty capable too, though obviously less so than the main. From what I can tell, it's doing more processing to make up for its lesser sensor compared to the main, and as a result, shadow seems to be lifted quite a lot, resulting in a flatter looking shot. It's not always the case, but you can see that it's trying to compensate, and it's worth noting. And the 64 megapixel half-inch sensor under that 3x zoom lens is a pretty solid setup too. And this means that though the lens is only capable of 3x, you still get crisp, sharp images with the 6x toggle. Images are usable up until I'd say around 10 times, and OnePlus will allow you to go all the way up to 100 times, which I honestly wouldn't recommend because, well, you just end up with mush rather than photos. Video on the OnePlus Open is better than I expected. Footage is sharp, smoothly stabilized, and the autofocus is quite quick and accurate. White balance is pretty good, but not as good as the Google Pixels in my opinion, and using the 3x zoom you can get some nice natural bokeh if you like that look. You're treated to not 1, not 2, but 3 options when it comes to taking selfies. You can use the external selfie shooter, the internal selfie shooter, or just use the main camera with the external display as your viewfinder. Obviously the main camera wins, but selfies shot with the smaller sensors don't come out bad either. It's really hard to tell the 2 dedicated selfie cameras apart, despite the difference in resolution, but I think the internal one takes a slightly sharper shot despite its lower resolution. I guess there are 2 additional ways you could use the ultra-wide camera or zoom all the way to 3 times, but realistically you're not going to be using these cameras, are you? And actually this is a good test of the OnePlus Open's microphones, which I feel are actually really good. Probably the best microphones I've heard from a smartphone for video, at least in a while, so if you're into making mobile content, maybe you want to pick up the OnePlus Open. OnePlus absolutely nailed the foldable formula with its Open, and I truly believe that every foldable should be like this, or at least use this as the benchmark and build on it. From the just right form factor with the wider external display, to the stacked spec sheet with terrific performance and battery life, all the way down to how OnePlus has made its multi-window setups really easy, and the crisp, clear speakers as well. The battery life is also mega impressive, as are those beastly screens. But it's not perfect. I think working on this thing being an IPX7 rated system would be a good idea, if anything for that peace of mind for the prospective buyers, and perhaps to tidy up the UI or bring it back from the ColorOS theme that it seems to be like right now to something a little more separated could get more enthusiasts on board. And though it's pretty well priced for a foldable, I don't see many people forking out that much money for a smartphone, so there's still the price issue. But in its totality, it's a brilliant smartphone and one that I can recommend to those looking for the best foldable out right now. Take note, Samsung and Google, this is how it's done. Let us know in the comments what you think of the OnePlus Open. Do you own one, or are you looking to pick one up? Were you expecting OnePlus to score an absolute screamer with this one? I certainly wasn't. Hit like if you enjoyed today's content and subscribe if you're new to never miss an upload. I've been Ryan Thomas with Android Police, and I'll catch you later. Cheers.